I am fortunate enough to be joined today by my colleague, Madison. Maddie, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be chatting with you.
Awesome. Well, one of the things that we talked about, I asked you to be on here, was about cold plunging. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your experience doing cold plunges.
Yeah. I'm curious about it. I haven't done it a ton. I was recently just at a Nordic spa where they did some education around it, and there was opportunities to do a cold plunge and a hot pool. And so I'm excited to talk more about it and learn a little bit more too.
That's part of what we're here for. But I want to ask you a few questions before we go to our expert in our interview. How do you feel about the hot cold thing? Like, was it a shock to your system? Did you enjoy it? What was in your mind?
Yeah, I think the initial idea of hopping from one of these like nice hot pools into a cold pool, not my favorite. I love heat. I love warmth, so not super appealing. But I do think, I don't know, you think about you jump in a cold lake and like you feel refreshed after and it wakes you up. And um, yeah, I've heard like other great health benefits about it. I'd love to learn more about what's true and what's maybe not. But I would say the initial getting in, not fun and a bit of a mental battle, but how you feel after is great.
So how did you conquer jumping into this cold pool? What did you do
Well,
to psych yourself up?
the lady that went before me, there's a variety of people there, and her tip was once your armpits are in, you're good. So I just got my armpits in as fast as I could. Um, and kind of fun this, I know not every cold plunge experience is like this, but there's like a fountain kind of, so you could walk under the fountain without having to like dunk your whole head under.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it make you think that maybe like in your future cold showers are a thing that you're going to be doing more of?
I could see it. I'm not a huge morning person, but I do like it. Like that would be a great way to maybe kickstart your day. Um, yeah, maybe.
Well, let's find out more about what there is to all this cold plunging stuff.
Sounds great.
Rest for the Wicked is produced in Calgary, Alberta on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Goodstoney First Nations, and the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. We make this acknowledgement as a small gesture of reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples who have lived on these lands for centuries. We were going to start, Lisa, by describing how much we like the cold.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Dr. Lisa Bélanger, and I don't mind it. Like I actually am super into cold plunging. In saying that, I haven't done it in a while, so I hope this is inspiration to plunge in again.
And I am Adam Rozenhart, and I once very nearly tried cold plunging. And for some reason, I'm glad that I didn't. But we have a guest today who's going to tell us all about the benefits of cold plunging when it comes to rest and recovery. And I'm going to throw it to you right now, Dr. Greg, to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Dr. Greg Wells, a physiologist, thrilled to be with you. Love studying human performance and health and well-being. So honored and grateful to be here and to chat anything and everything we can do to get healthier and reach our potential.
Amazing. So my first question is basically, why cold plunging? What made you start playing around with this?
Well, I was an athlete growing up as a competitive swimmer. So, since I was 18 years old, I've been, in and around cold water. Back then it was for recovery. But actually, in 2016, I went to an event called the Titan Summit in Zurich, and there was a gentleman there who had been involved in cold plunging. And we went out into Lake Geneva in the middle of the night. Snow was coming down in December. And I learned how to do the breath work to enable you to get into the water and to stay there and to stay warm, the breath of fire. And it was just a really cool experience. And obviously we were doing it with a bunch of people, so it was relatively safe, and we got out, and I loved it and I really enjoyed it. I did it intermittently after that, but during the pandemic, when things were a total train wreck and dumpster fire, things were not good, and I was not feeling good at all. And so one day in the middle of lockdown, I snuck out of the house to go for a walk on the beach near where I live, and it was again snowing, and I was like, this is just a mess. So the only thing that could be worse than this would be if I was in the water in the lake in the middle of winter. And I was like, oh, I guess this is happening. So I got down to the underwear and walked in, and about a minute in, felt significantly better mentally. Physically, I was in the discomfort of being in cold water, obviously, but like psychologically, I improved so much. A little while later, when I got back to my house, I went and did a little bit of looking up and found that cold water immersion has a measurable effect upon mood and even symptoms of depression in some cases. There was very little research at the time. There's a lot more now, but I've been doing it pretty consistently ever since. And so the origin was swimming when I was a kid, and then kind of learned from it how to do it right from someone about 10 years ago. And then during the pandemic, went all in, and I've been doing it pretty consistently ever since.
So on that note, I love that it was spontaneous. That's incredible. So most people associate cold plunging or cold with stress or shock. Can you explain a little bit behind the physiological mechanisms on how this can, you talked about feeling better or lead to rest or lead to improvements in health?
It is really interesting that when people think about cold water immersion, pain and suffering is the first thing that comes to mind. And I'll acknowledge that it does not feel good. In fact, it's terrible every single time that I do it. So we have nerve endings in our skin, and it's curious that the ones that detect cold are the same ones that detect pain. They're called nociceptors, depending on how you pronounce it. And so cold is perceived by the body as painful. And of course, that's a defense mechanism against getting frostbite and hypothermia and all those sorts of things. But those sensors are the same. So it is painful. What's really curious is then when you enter the water, we do feel that pain, and there is a bit of a shock. There's a gasp reflex, which is why you must do this with someone else and never do it alone, because you can easily inhale water and drown. It's super dangerous. Like do not do this alone. Get someone to teach you how to do it safely. And then once you're in the water, you are breathing. Your breathing is under control. You're with someone else to make sure that you're safe. I've done some measurements using my wearable device and looked into some of the research. We published research years ago at the University of Toronto on inflammation, but the initial response is that because of the shock, there is an increase of the stress response, which is going to cause immune cells to go out into your blood, which potentially might help you to prevent respiratory infections. There's some research that seems to suggest that cold showers in the morning consistently reduce your risk of upper respiratory tract infections. So if you don't want to get in the cold water, you can just take a cold shower at the end of your shower in the morning. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify. You mean cold? It reduces.
Yeah, cool to cold. Yes, upper respiratory tract infections. Cool to cold water on your forehead, 30 seconds at the end of your shower in the morning does get you some of those benefits. But then getting into the cold water and being in cold water immersion, either to your waist, to your chest, after a while, you actually do feel your nervous system begin to relax. When I measured my heart rate doing some cold water immersion, unlike the sauna where my heart rate goes up, when I'm in the cold water, my heart rate actually goes down. And there is some really good evidence. It seems to suggest that there's a shift from sympathetic stress nervous system activation to parasympathetic rest, recovery, and regeneration when we are in the cold. So there's a lot going on here. Many things are being teased out. We're learning a ton about this. There are probably differences between men and women around this, but there's all sorts of very interesting things going on when it comes to cold water immersion and how it feels. It does not feel good, but there's a few positive things happening inside.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny you mentioned the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, because I'm wondering if you know of any research or can speak from experience what some of the long-term effects are on the balance between those systems as we engage in a practice of cold plunging.
That's a really interesting question. I am actually not aware of any long-term studies on the impact of cold water immersion on parasympathetic to sympathetic system dominance in humans. I would love to look that up. But let's take a step back and sort of logic our way through what's happening here. If we have a consistent practice where we are doing sleeping better, getting exercise, doing meditation, eating healthy food, stretching, taking saunas, cold water immersion, and we do that consistently, any of the above, over an extended period of time, in general, that is going to help us to improve our cardiovascular system, our nervous system, our immune system, all of which then leads to health and well-being. So although I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to go look it up right after we get off this podcast, because now I'm like, oh, every time I do one of these, someone asks me a question I don't know the answer to. I do not know the answer to that one. I would logic my way through that these practices are going to have long-term benefits. And if we look at some of the practices that have been in use by humans for hundreds to thousands of years, that's what really interests me. So for example, hot, cold contrast, saunas and getting into the snow, for example, have been practiced for hundreds, if not thousands of years in Scandinavia, in Russia, in Canada, in indigenous communities around in those areas. So this is a practice that's been going on for a long time, much like meditation has. So when we have hundreds to thousands of years of practices where people have found these to be beneficial, I think that's a pretty good indication that there's probably something happening here. I am not 100% sure of the studies on that, so take it with a grain of salt, double check that thinking, but I'm sure that there's some positive benefits if you do this consistently over a long period of time. I'm not sure what the research says about that. I'm going to go look it up for sure.
We'll get into it a little bit. I have another kind of physiological question, but when we talk about mental health and clarity and what it means to have a ritual practice to suffer, right? So on the physiology part of it, is there an optimal time of day that we should be cold plunging? Is there any research on again, that impact on sleep or impact on waking up? You talked about morning showers. And I don't know if that's just because most of us shower in the morning.
Well, it's the answer to when should we be doing these health practices really revolves around the number one answer is whenever you can do it consistently. So if it happens for you that you can do it first thing in the morning consistently, great. If it works out better for you at night, even better. If there's a cold plunge or sauna at the gym, carry on, do it at the gym. I think that the morning cold plunge is awesome. First of all, from a psychological perspective, there is research evidence that shows that cold water immersion improves mood and lowers symptoms of depression in men and women. Actually, the research seems to show that it might benefit women slightly more. So I love starting the day with something that has a measurable, demonstrable effect upon my mental health. There's also the concept from Japanese culture on misogi, or doing something that is incredibly difficult and uncomfortable, and how that has benefits for us psychologically, and also in terms of our ability to then subsequently do hard things throughout the rest of the day. So again, that setting yourself up with doing something challenging in the morning that has a positive impact on your mental health, I think is a great practice. There's some really cool evidence that seems to suggest that saunas, now we're going back and forth between hot and cold, but the contrast is interesting. Saunas seem to be helpful in the evenings because there is some evidence that shows that heat improves our sleep. So the cold water in the morning and the heat at night is something that I would generally recommend, largely because of the mental health benefits and the principle of misogi that makes the rest of the day relatively easier, because nothing could be as bad as getting into ice cold water first thing in the morning, and then counter that with some heat at night to help you to sleep better, and you would totally win.
I like the idea of Lisa's autobiography being called Cold Mornings, Hot Nights, just based on what you said, Dr. Greg. Now, I'm less than a novice when it comes to cold plunging. I literally went to a Nordic spa in Victoria a couple summers ago and actively avoided the cold plunge pool. So tell me a little bit about the experience. You're entering freezing water, your brain is screaming, get out of here. What's happening? Do you have any insight in what's happening in our brains during that sort of overriding moment of panic?
Yeah. When we enter into cold water, I love it as a physiologist because you're seeing mind, body, emotion, spirit all come together at once in a battle. And when you enter into cold water, that cold water is touching your skin. Pain receptors and cold receptors are the same. They're sending signals to your brain that you are in danger. Something really bad is happening here. I am in pain, which will then send signals down to get you to stop. So you have a battle inside the brain around your conscious mind, which is sending signals to go forwards, and all the feedback mechanisms coming from your body back up to your brain saying, stop. And that's where the challenge is. And I think part of the benefit of this practice is that it does help to train structures like the inferior frontal cortex in the brain that enable you to elevate your decision making, that strengthen your decision making capabilities, such that then subsequently doing hard things becomes easier and easier and easier. So it is an interesting practice. There's the feedback from the environment that's saying, oh my gosh, we're in danger. And then the feed forwards data coming out of the brain saying, we're going to do this thing. And that's where some of the actual mental training happens. You can have a similar effect if you don't feel like getting into the cold water when you're in the gym, if you're lifting weights. There will be a point where fatigue increases. That information will go back from your muscles saying, we're in trouble, we're tired here, please stop. And your brain saying, we're going to do a couple more reps. That exact same challenge, that exact same balance point occurs when you're doing weights, for example. It will also happen if you're out on a bike ride, riding up a hill. Your muscles will produce lactic acid. They'll say stop. Your brain will say, I'm getting to the top of the hill. Like this occurs all through our life. It'll happen at work too. Like I want to get through my emails, and your brain's gonna be saying, I'm done. But you got to get through all of the work. So it's a really cool practice that plays out in many aspects of our lives.
And I think that's exactly it. It's a practice, right? Like if we push through, if we learn how to do it, we have access to it when we need it in other parts of life. So the reason why I've just like you, just being a physiologist, having conversations around cold plunging for years and years, and I had no interest. It seemed terrible. And I saw this documentary. I say documentary, it was probably a reel, on a man that lost his wife. And he's the one right now that holds the record for the longest cold plunge, or was at least a year ago. And he talked about how it helped him so much with grief. It's actually the only time of day he wasn't, especially at the beginning, he didn't experience grief is when he was cold plunging, because his mind is doing exactly the battle it's talking about. So when you almost think of it as a mindful state in some ways where you're focused on one thing. So it's become something that I think about when you're dealing with racing thoughts, when you're dealing with difficult things. It can be a practice to try to train your brain into concentrating, focusing on one thing. I do know a lot of practitioners and people talk about that Zen-like experience. And I'll tell you that mine is a little bit more, I wouldn't call it Zen-like. I'd say after cold plunging, I get almost like euphoria is too strong of a word, but almost dopamine hits or something like that. But what is the physiology that happens post-plunge for people?
Post-plunge, there's some benefits and some actual dangers too. So we have to be really careful after we get out of the cold water. For sure, there's the endorphin rush, just like you would get the runner's high. Endorphins are produced in the brain that make you feel fantastic. That will happen often when we're in little stressful moments, like going for a long run, or at the post-workout sensation that you get. And after cold plunging, there's no question there is a positive effect upon our mood and a lowering symptoms for depression. Evidence shows that in a few different studies. Cold water swimming appears to be particularly great for improving our mental health, not just cold water immersion. But there is a little bit of a danger too. And the danger comes from the fact that when you're in the cold water, your skin gets cold, blood flow goes to the skin, the blood itself gets cold. And so when you get out of the cold water and you start to move, your muscles are contracting, blood is flowing, and that blood goes from your skin, the cold blood from your skin, into your internal organs. And it can cause a very rapid drop in core body temperature, which could trigger huge shivering and actually some other significant challenges as well. So after you do get out of the water, that's actually the point where I want people to be the most careful. Get the parkas on, get the towels going, get back to a warm spot. If you need to jump into a warm bath or warm shower or even a sauna, that's the time to do that, and make sure you're not alone, because it can be a little bit overwhelming when you get those deep shiver shakes afterwards, which I've felt many times having stayed in the water a little bit too long. So there's the initial endorphin rush, amazing, makes you feel awesome, but be very careful of the after drop of your core body temperature once that cold water goes from your skin back to the internal organs.
So, Lisa mentioned dopamine. We talked about endorphins. We're sort of like always looking for that next big dopamine hit, whether it's scrolling through your phone or, for me, it's videos of cats and mini eggs. But how can cold plunging help reset like our sort of, I guess, baseline for dopamine and make us feel more content? What's the physiological explanation for that?
Well, right now, let's face it, we're all addicted to our devices. And I actually think we're going to look back upon our devices the same way we look back upon smoking. It's not having a positive impact on our mental health. It's not having a positive impact on our physical health. By the way, I have all of them and I use them for work and communicating with my family. There's some aspects of this that are incredible. The addiction to the short-term dopamine hits, I think, is extraordinarily problematic. So I'm a huge fan of any pattern interrupt that stops the scroll, if you will, gets us off of our devices, brings us back into the present moment, such that we can be here and experience real life. And one of the really interesting things about cold plunging when we're doing that is quite often you're in nature. You're by a river, you're by a lake, maybe by the ocean, and you're outside. You probably don't have your phone with you if you're getting into the water, and you're in nature. You can see the clouds, you can see the trees, you can see the fractal patterns in the water, you can hear the waves. You're probably with other people. We know that there's benefits of social connection that are so profound. And so when we're in these environments, when we're doing some practices like cold plunging or going for a walk outside, we get all of these incredible benefits that interrupt the pattern of just simply sitting and staring at our devices. So I'm a huge fan of it for that reason. It's a great, it's why I love swimming. It's why I love paddleboarding. It's why I love running. You can't really look at your phone while you're running. Shouldn't be looking at your phone while you're running. And I even have now taken to the point where I go to the gym. If I have to track my heart rate, I'll use a wearable. I'll stick my headphones in to get some music, but the phone doesn't come with me. Like, I don't want to be looking at my email in between sets of work exercise at the gym. So I love the pattern interrupt of all of these practices in a dopamine, in a doom scrolling dopamine addicted world that we're in right now.
And you're not like putting your phone in a plastic bag and bringing it into the river.
I did that. No, not in the river. I did the plastic bag into the phone when I was paddleboarding twice and lost. And so I now have two phones that are on the bottom of Lake Ontario. So I no longer do that.
I kind of brought this up earlier in my statement, but from a mental chatter perspective, an overactive mind, overthinking, could we use cold plunging as a silencer or as way to silence the noise?
It's so interesting how when we do physical practices, often there is a powerful mind element to them. And so cold water immersion is amazing for that because it is really uncomfortable. Like, it can be even a little bit painful, if you will. Again, it's nociceptors that sense cold water, the same ones that sense pain. So inevitably when we do this, you can't be thinking about a lot of different things. Like, your mind, out of pure necessity, comes back into the present moment. It stops you from thinking about what you're making for dinner. It stops you thinking about your email to-do list. It brings you back into the present moment. And then you can let go of some of this tension. You can bring your attention back to the moment and let all of that tension go. Feel your nervous system calm down. You may even get to the point where you can look around, recognize the fact that you're outdoors, probably in a really beautiful environment, in nature. And that's so powerful right now in an era when we're just constantly inundated with notifications and communications and information overload. A chance to use this practice, cold water immersion, and saunas work as well, as does exercise, as does meditation, as does journaling. All of these practices just help us come back into the present moment and break this addiction to technology that we have so that we can re-engage with life as it actually exists here and now. So it's a really powerful tool to, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's painful in some cases, it is that discomfort. It is that drive to deal with the environment, necessity to deal with our environment that brings us back into the present moment. It can really help with actually training mindfulness, which is the ability to be here now.
That's interesting, because I am now going to ask you to advise me. If my goal, Greg, is like mental restoration instead of like, doing some physical body optimization. In other words, like I want to use cold plunging in the mix of the other things I do, exercise, meditation, eating healthy, as you mentioned earlier. How, as a newbie, how would I approach this? Like, what are the steps? What are the things I need to avoid? You mentioned making sure that someone's there to make sure I don't drown, which is great advice. But how would you tell me, what would you say to me to get started in this practice?
I think finding somebody to do this practice with you might be the hardest part of it.
Yeah.
To convince
even if they
somebody,
just even if they stand on the beach and watch you, make sure that like they'll call someone if you go down. Anyway.
Yeah.
So how do we get started with all of this? I just want us to go back to the basics and recognize you do not need to go into a cold body of water for 20 minutes in the ice. Like that is not necessary in the middle of winter. Let's not do that, because then no one will ever do this ever again. If you are curious, say you're cold water curious and want to get started, the easiest way is at the end of your shower, your daily shower, or even if you've had a hot bath, stand up as the water is draining, turn on the shower, let the warm water, flow over you, get comfy, and then just let the water hit your forehead and just gradually turn the temperature down until you're like, yeah, that's about as much as I feel like doing today. And then just see if you can do a few breaths. Just bring yourself into the present moment. Exhale out, the water be going over your face, just like blow the bubbles or, spray the water, do whatever you got to do. But just allow that water to hit your forehead for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe 3 to 5 slow breaths. That's a great way to get started, because you're bringing yourself into the present moment. You're in water. Rhythmic, repetitive patterns drop you down into a theta brainwave state, which opens up creativity, innovation, and problem solving. And you're beginning to get used to some of the feelings related to cold water. That's as much as most people will ever do, and as much as most people will ever need to do. Of course, you can get used to it being colder and colder and colder. Maybe you can stay in the cold shower for a little bit longer. And then lo and behold, you might find yourself at a Nordic spa. You'll notice that there's several hot tubs there, various different temperatures of heat. And you're like, that's a cold plunge. Maybe I'll try it. Phenomenal way to get started. You can alternate between the sauna, the steam room, the hot tub, and maybe a little tiny bit of cold. And that is an amazing practice, because actually the hot cold contrast apparently is the most beneficial. And then if you want to get really hardcore and lean right into the whole Misogi principle of doing extraordinarily uncomfortable things, that's when you might want to consider doing some sort of cold water actual immersion into a river or a lake, and in which case you definitely need to do this with someone who's done it before. So reach out to see if any of your friends have done it and try to get someone to show you how to do it safely, and do not do it alone, as I mentioned before.
I just bought a place that's on a lake and it just started to freeze over. So I feel like this is the perfect time. But I was telling Adam before we started recording, there's not something warm enough, close enough to me. Like I love doing this practice, but I want a sauna to be close. I want, I guess, towels and whatever else. But it's quite a walk between the lake and the rest of the house. So we'll see.
One step at a time. No rush.
Have you, like, this is something that you've practiced. You talked about doing it in Zurich. I'm sure it's been something you've done in multiple locations around the world, and been able to meet people that are also doing it. And this is part of their practice. Do you have any stories or thoughts on people using it for restoration, or how people have used it within their lives?
It's interesting. I think a lot of the cold water immersion thinking originated with sports. Not originated, it's been done for hundreds of thousands of years in Scandinavia, but and in sweat lodges in Canada and the States, and there's many other like long-term practice. People have been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It was really popular in sports when I was growing up. And of course, there were the athletes, and after workout, they would get into the cold baths, and it was thought to reduce inflammation and soreness. I actually did a study on this at the University of Toronto. We looked at track athletes and we worked them out really, really hard, and men and women. And then we did cold plunges of different temperatures and different durations, and discovered that there's an optimal temperature range and an optimal duration to be doing this. It also seemed to have really interesting effects on inflammation. It didn't always lower inflammation. It had to be the right temperature, it had to be the right amount of time. And what happens when we get into the cold and we have that anti-inflammatory effect is that it actually stops adaptation. It gets rid of some of the fatigue. It gets rid of some of the discomfort and the pain. Actually in our study, it improved performance on the subsequent days. It immediately. The challenge is that it also lowered inflammation. Now we need inflammation in order to spark adaptation. So there's a time to do this and a time not to do this. If you are training, if you are doing a block of exercise, preparing, building your endurance, building your strength, and you really want to improve your physiology in response to exercise training, cold water immersion after your workouts is probably not a very good idea, because it will blunt the inflammatory response and maybe even slow your adaptation down, just like actually antioxidant vitamins will do, which is interesting. As massage will do as well. There's a time to do massage. There's a time to do cold water. There's a time to do antioxidant vitamins. We do find it super helpful during competition, because you're actually not trying to adapt at that point. You're just trying to keep your performance as high as you can over the course of the competition as the fatigue and as the wear and tear on your body builds up. So I think some of the most interesting stories that we've found are from people figuring out how this works for them. Some people find that it's really beneficial for their psychology. I've got a buddy that does this at sunrise in a river in the mountains every single day, has been doing it for years. It's shocking how absolutely disciplined he is in every aspect of his life, this being one of them. That's mind-blowing. When I go down to the beach in the morning here in Toronto, Canada, it's literally me and a dozen groups of women who are all with their hats and their gloves, and they're laughing and talking and having a great time as I sit there and suffer all by myself, usually with my dog and wife watching over me to make sure I don't actually drown. So it's different for different people. There's different times that we can be doing this. It's definitely something that has a physiological effect. The game is to try to figure out, how does this work for you? When should I be doing this? When does it benefit me? Is it in the morning? Is it, is it before a workout? Is it something that just I want to do on a weekly basis? It's different for everyone, and everyone can find their own little story in this to make it theirs.
I love that you said your dog's watching over you to make sure you're not drowning.
I got a great video, actually. I was in the ice, like the actual ice, and the dog came out to try to get me. And she was like, yeah, no, I'm out. She left. So she walks out, and my wife was videotaping it. She walks out and she's like, yeah, you're done. And then she literally left me all alone in the ice. My dog was not willing to sacrifice herself for me at all.
Amazing. One of the weirdest business trips I ever went on in my 20s, I went down to Lethbridge with a colleague who was a long distance runner. And he was like, I'm going to go for a run and then we'll have dinner or whatever. He came back and he's like, I'm going to get into a very cold bathtub. I need you to keep filling the ice bucket and bringing it into the bathroom. And I was like, I don't think this is covered by our corporate travel policy. So that was
we actually had speaking of people filling ice at a hotel once at a major conference I was at the Ritz. We ordered bathtubs full of ice. So during the day, we'd be like, I would like my bathtub to be filled full of ice. So when I'm done at the end of the day, I can get into an ice. And they were like, what? I'm like, yeah, no, filled up bathtubs full of ice. So there can be some strange requests when people try to figure out how to incorporate this into their lives.
And this is, I took a couple of friends that are professional athletes and travel all around, and it was their first cold plunge. And of course I did it in the Rockies, and it was breathtaking and beautiful. And then they got that kind of adrenaline rush after, and they're like, oh, this is something I could really get into. And they started talking about the different cities and where they should go. And I was like, you really have to go with somebody if you're going into open water in a city you don't know, this is a recipe for disaster. But it is pretty incredible way to get to know a place and to get to know people, because there's people, there's meetups all over the world doing this, just like the women that you see in the morning.
Yeah, let's be very, very clear. Cold water immersion in rivers, lakes, and oceans is dangerous. It is dangerous because you walk into the water, it is super cold. You have a shock reflex where you're like, You breathe in quickly. If you happen to breathe in water, it's over. You're going to choke and maybe go under. That's not good. Also, when you go and you hyperventilate, and when you hyperventilate, you blow off your carbon dioxide, which constricts the blood vessels in your brain. You can pass out, called shallow water blackout. We do not want that to happen, which is why you must always do this with somebody else. Having said that, once that's sorted out and you're not going alone, as you travel the world, there are people doing this. And they are typically doing it first thing in the morning as the sun comes up, by the river, by the lake, like somewhere absolutely beautiful. So if you can find a group that is doing this, get there early, meet people, laugh. I mean, you're going to have a shared common experience, something to talk about. It is definitely, a really cool way to have a little special moment wherever you're going. I go a lot to the Rockies as well, the mountains, and the town where I'm usually staying has a couple groups. They go to different places, and it's awesome to join them in the morning. And let's face it, if you're with a group of people that are getting into ice water at sunrise, there's going to be some cool people there. So you're going to find some really interesting people to chat to with some great stories.
So Adam, when are we going?
Oh God, Lisa, do we, I mean, okay, you've just moved out east. You live on a lake. When I come to visit you, I guess we're going to do it.
Yes. She's never going to come visit.
No,
Yeah, that's right.
Going to actively avoid it as much as I possibly can. Dr. Greg Wells. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Did this convince you to do it at all? Like, are you now cold plunge curious?
I mean, I'd say yes. I think just because I am quite risk averse, all the warnings that we've received from Greg suggest that I'll probably do it in a tank at a spa.
Yeah.
Rather than like a lake or a river to start with. But
yeah,
I recognize that there's something here. To your point, people have been doing this for thousands of years. So I'm not better than the best Scandinavian, and I'm not going to pretend that I am.
That's awesome.
So Dr. Greg Wells, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and enjoy the cold.
Thanks, buddy. It's snowing right now. I'm going to have to get motivated to get in there. I might try to get 1 or 2 done before I head down to Nicaragua, because there will be no cold water down there. So maybe I'll do that. Like, I'll jump in the icy cold water here, jump on the plane, and then get into the nice warm Pacific once I get down there on Saturday. So I'll do the hot cold contrast into completely different parts of North America.
Amazing. Glad that you get to do that, man. And thanks for joining us. Rest for the Wicked was filmed on location in Calgary, Alberta by Philip Harrison and Centerpin Media. Pre- and post-production by Conscious Works and Adverb Communications. And of course,
you can connect with us through the Rest for the Wicked Instagram and TikTok accounts at Rest for the Wicked Pod. And make sure you subscribe to Rest for the Wicked wherever pods are cast.
I've never heard anyone say that before, so I wanted to
I like it.
We'd love to hear about your experiences and struggles with different forms of rest. And if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too.
In the meantime, remember, get some rest so you can stay wicked.